Before we begin today's video, I just kind of want to address a couple of things. So, at first you might hear that there is no music behind me, whether that be ridiculously quiet or ridiculously loud. It is something I'm going to ditch for a while. I just think that gotten a lot of feedback in regards to the last vid, which I did rush out a little bit, so I didn't quite have the mixing to the same extent that I wanted to. So that led to it being a lot louder, and people were saying there was issues with that, and I'm more than aware, and sorry about that, guys. So for the next little while, I'm probably going to try audioless for videos like this, where I'm just kind of discussing topics. I'll probably still try play around with various like background audio for stuff, but I think for discussion topics like this, you'd rather just hear me babble my piece rather than insert JRPG music that I like a lot into the backgrounds that's incredibly overpowering. But without further ado, let's leave that in the past, and let's go talk about removal. How's it going, guys? And welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about the differences in how people are approaching removal in SV Draft, and what a difference a year makes. So, as you can see in front of you, there is the DCL2 doc, and specifically, the usage stats for the SV. And the reason I have this up is because there is one mon in particular here that is of importance. That mon is Tentacruel. And Tentacruel was fairly popular throughout 2024 as a spinner, due to its ability to spin on a lot of mons and its wide variety of utility options. Knockoff support, it could flip turn, had access to access to toxic, access to stuff like acid spray, and had coverage to the point where it could deal with various mons. Yes, Tentacruel had its drawbacks, and obviously it wasn't as good a spinner as you could get. We're not even going to bother talking about the main three spinners being Tusk, Terapagos, and Treads in that order, because it's kind of boring. There's no point actually talking about them. I only want to talk about what if you didn't have one of those three, because that's where the change has been in the last year. So, we look at Tentacruel. It was very popular. It did okay, but the main thing I want to focus on is that it was picked up 3.5 times. I think it was picked up at mids rather than dropped at mids. So, yeah, popular mon. And Blastoise kind of comes into this category too, except people were a lot warier of Blastoise, and I think even coming into this DCL, Blastoise wasn't as popular. I think a lot of that was because its offensive capabilities was ruined by Mirror Herb, and that was kind of seen in DPL on multiple occasions where Mirror Herb reverse sweeps were seen as Blastoises were trying to click Shell Smash, or just click Rapid Spin, and the speed boost got copied, which was also problematic. So Tentacruel was kind of the pick when it came to these sorts of removals. It was kind of the next one down if the other three went. And I think I have a game here that is the perfect case in point for what Tentacruel did in this metagame. And this is a game between Kakrik and Hunter. Hunter using Rain to the surprise of absolutely nobody, because Hunter loves Rain, regardless of generation. And Kakrik has this Lando T, Iron Crown, Terra Iron Boulders team. There's also a Valiant there, but I'm just going to ignore it because that's funnier. And as you can see, the Tentacruel matchup looks pretty solid once the Chalidon's dead. But you'll kind of see as this game goes on exactly what Tentacruel did. So Hunter leads his Terapagos as Kakrik leads Iron Crown. Terra Shift goes off as we see a Volt Switch to break the Terra Shell, and he chooses to go hard into Iron Boulder on a Rapid Spin. Terapagos trying to get the speed boost here. Switches out into a Chalidon as Iron Boulder Terra rocks. I did not show you Terra types in this game, and frankly, I don't care. It's not the important point of the video. Stamina boost on the Mighty Cleave. Iron Crown comes back in on a Flash Cannon. Looks like AV damage. I can't tell that for sure. Focus Blast on the Torn Pivot as we see a foul play come off. Crit doing 33 is a joke. And that Tachyon just kind of screams that it is like a fat Torn. U turns out into Arch. which takes the Tachyon and gets a +2 defense boost for relatively free. As Focus Blast eats the Chople, just about doesn't get the kill, as Body Press picks it off. And in comes Iron Boulder, Banded Iron Cleave, or I'm assuming Banded anyways, it might be Scarfed, as we see that take it out. And what did I say before we went into this? That once the Arch was dead, Tentacruel looks pretty damn annoying. And, you know, we'll get into that here. Terra Ground Torn, the Boulder's not choiced in any way, clicks EQ predicting that. On a U-turn out, as we see the Pelipper come in, as Rain goes up for the first time. Tentacruel pivots into the Pelipper, as we see a double into Basket Legion, which opts to flip turn out, doing 28. Trapghost comes in and takes a Toxic, and we see the Tentacruel's Rain Dish. So this is going to be an absolute pain in the hole. And Black Sludge, so lots of recovery coming in here from Kekrik, as well as the Protect reveal on the Meteor Beam, which, not great for Hunter. So we're just going to see more Toxic stalling here. He goes hard Boulder, knowing that Starstorm won't kill. Starstorm does 28 from +1, that bounced. And he's no switch in here, so he just has to sack the Trapghost to close combat. And we see the Basket Legion come back in. He goes hard Samurott. His Wave Crash does 52. But the Citrus Berry means it'll be able to live another one. Switches out in the fear of Sucker Punch as Ceaseless Edge misses, as Ceaseless Edge does. And that, folks, is why Samurott does not get drafted anymore. It's because Ceaseless Edge is not reliable. Spikes is 100% accurate, kids. It's just easier. The double from Overquill into Pelipper, scouting for Water Move, or the Landers switch in. But it's still an easy Tentacruel. U-turns out, but what's he going into? We see the Overquill come in, but this is still going to take a lot of damage as it tries to SD up. Rain Boosted Surf doing 61. +2 Crunch, not quite getting the job done, as Surf picks off the Overquill, and everything else just kind of struggles to kill it. Basket Legion comes in, we see a Protect on a Wave Crash, or at least I assumed it was a Wave Crash, and the Tentacruel's back at 56. Kekrik goes Landers here because it does absolutely nothing. It is Pasha though, so it does live. But another Wave Crash picks it off. The most useless crit of all time. And yeah, you can just kind of see the way that this game's going. Flip turn picks off the Torn, and in comes Boulder. And in comes the Tentacruel again. Aquajet does 14. And we do know it's banned at this point, so this is just another easy Toxic on Kekrik's part. Gets the Rain Dish and the Black Sludge, and can just easily protect here. And the Tentacruel is back at 75. Like, it was stuff like this. Obviously, this is a slightly heightened example because of the fact it's in rain, and it just makes it really easy for the Tentacruel to just kind of pivot in and out constantly because it's getting even more passive recovery. The Protect here to scout what he locks himself into, which happens to be Flip Turn. Tentacruel's at full again. Remember when this thing took like 70 from a +2 Crunch earlier? Click Surf, doesn't quite get the kill. It's still at 76. Surf picks off the Pelipper, and then it's going to be down to one last Banded Basket Legion versus the World. And Protect to Scout. Liquidation. I don't remember how much this does. But, yeah, as I was saying, this was, like, yes, this isn't necessarily a video. This isn't necessarily a showcase of how Tentacruel was as a spinner. But I think this just kind of showed the way that Tentacruel was able to fit into the meta. Like, it was just an annoying side piece to, like, flip turn and enable to get into threats. Or could just kind of sit on a bunch of stuff and annoy it. And this is definitely an example in the latter case. But this is also the go-to Tentacruel replay. And I think it makes sense to show this here. I think we all know how Tentacruel operates as a spinner. And we will kind of get into a point where this was just how Tentacruel was. Banded Liquidation's doing 30. What a joke. And yeah, Basque Legion dies the poison. Knackered wins the game pretty convincingly, and Tentacruel puts on an absolute all-star showing. But I think it's safe to say that the era of Tentacruel did not last long. It was honestly post DCL where things definitely took a more offensive turn, and all of a sudden Tentacruel became too passive. It was kind of showing cracks as this DCL went on, that Tentacruel maybe wasn't quite able to keep up with dealing with the setup threats, and so it was quickly ditched. And what it was ditched for is an interesting discussion. Because the main things it was ditched for, in terms of a spinner, was Cyclizar, better known as Charles. And I don't actually have any Cyclizar replays to go through on this, but I'm more so just going to talk about why Cyclizar kind of became the spinner of choice. And a lot of it is because of the fact that it had the offensive utility to deal with the prominent ghost types in the tier. Remember, come DCL2, that it was not a time where Petulant usage was exploding. Rotom was popular, but at the same time, it was still like semi-dealable with. And if there's one thing that's true about literally any good removal in SV, is that it actually struggles to beat Rotom. It's ridiculous how good Rotom is as a 6-pointer right now, or just in general. It's kind of wild. But what Cyclizar had is it had the speed, it had the natural power, both on the physical and special side, and it had unpredictability, which was something that Tentacruel just didn't. And I think that kind of caused it to skyrocket in usage, and that's why it got picked up in every single DCL draft. The other thing that people kind of pivoted to, and this has been alluded to other videos on the channel before, was the decision to kind of go towards defoggers. And there is 3 of them in particular that have kind of been of popularity. Those being Corviknight, which Corviknight's another mon that I don't have more stuff to follow up on here. But what Corviknight does is pretty simple. You know, it gets in, it defogs if it has to, it U-turns out when it has to, it can screens up, it can be a support piece, it can iron defense alongside like Dragon Dancers just to make sure that it doesn't beat them. It's overall just a relatively solid steal, and while yes, it's not everybody's cup of tea, it is definitely one of the more reliable defoggers. And people were pivoting to defog because it was for 2 reasons. The first, of course, being the rise in the ghost types, like I said, the main 2 being Petulant and Rotom, in terms of just kind of, they stopped all the main spinners. Well, I say stopped when 2 of the top 3 are ground types, but Petulant's just that good. It's annoying. And the other thing was screens. And screens offense was definitely taking a major spike at the start of this year, and that has kind of continued to be the trend. So I think people have kind of gravitated towards defog to be able to counteract that. The other defogger of mention here is, let me just find it, is Mandibuzz. Yes, we're doing this live, folks. There we go. Only drafted 3 times, which is a little lower than what I expected. Especially because Mandibuzz kind of has all the utility options that I mentioned earlier with Tentacruel. But 1, it's a hell of a lot harder to kill. And 2, it fits structures a lot better. Like, it's easier to slap a Mandibuzz onto teams because of the fact that it can check so much. Whereas Tentacruel just doesn't quite have the same when it comes to stats. And Mandibuzz obviously does have anti-setup tools. Yes, Tentacruel is Haze, but Mandibuzz, you have both Foul Play and Whirlwind to be worried about, as well as every other option it could potentially have. So, these were kind of the 2 premier defoggers that kind of rose to prominence. There is one more, which I will get into in a sec, and I do have an example game of that. But that is a mon that has been getting usage regardless, and now people have kind of focused more on the fact of like, oh, it can also defog. That's great. So, speaking of Mandibuzz, we have this game here. And Mandibuzz was particularly popular on the Who structures. What is a Who structure, you might ask? Well, what if you grab round 1 speed? It was Meowscarada for a while. It can be Darkrai. That's kind of been the shift lately, as Who keeps getting sniped on the stuff he wants. But if in an ideal world, he would want the Meowscarada for this. So what if you get a Meowscarada, an Iron Treads to act as your reliable spinner and Steel type, an Almamola because this thing is Jesus, And, you know, obviously we all know the Who logic of bring Assault Vest Alma Mola anytime there's a special threat you can't switch into. A breaker, which you don't see on your screen right now. I promise you there is a Terra Keldeo that's benched. A bunch of other fat pieces, and a defogger. That defogger typically being Mandibuzz. Or it's also shown to be Corviknight, but it's Mandibuzz in this case. You get the Who structure, which is semi-stall with some offensive capabilities in the form typically of a cleaner and a breaker. So this is a game that came up during DPL, where Who was coming up against 64 squares, and this is just the perfect showcase of, one, why this team needs hazards off, two, why Mandibuzz is there to keep hazards off, and three, the perfect Draft League player logic of Draft League player clicks Volt Turn. You'll see why as we get going here. So we see a Uxie lead on the Hydrapple, which is Terra Fairy, might I add, as we see a trick. So the Mandibuzz is choice scarf for the game. And yet, I'm talking about its defog capabilities. We'll get into that in a sec. It clicks Toxic on the Uxie, as the Uxie U turns out into Chi-Yu, thinking, oh, this is a free turn to, like, force some progress. Chi-Yu clicks Nasty Plot. This Hydrapple, to the surprise of absolutely nobody, is Assault Vested and just Dragon Tails it out, taking 79 in the process. Uxie comes back in. We see an Almamola pivot from Who in classic Who fashion, as the Iron Hands comes in on a U-turn. The SD comes off as the Aloe flip turns into Pecharunt. I just hiccuped there, guys, my bad. Toxic comes off in the Pecharunt, but we see a Lumberry, which cures the confusion and the poison, as we see the EQ come off. We see a Nightshade click here, as the Iron Hands goes for another EQ, getting 68% off. And we see a Destiny Bond here, as EQ trades. And this is the only Mon that was really capable on 64 Squares' team of beating the Mandibuzz plus Hydrapple Core. And Almamola to an extent. It was the only kind of breaker he had. So Who having that gone, turn 9, in exchange for the one Mon that didn't look like it was doing much else in the rest of the matchup, is just ideal for him. And you'll kind of see how he's able to dominate the rest of this game. Masquerada comes in on the Gulge. We see a U-turn out here on the Iron Treads, which is revealed to be Helmet. And he goes Hydrapple just for more regen here, because he knows he can go Almamola. As rocks go up, we see a Volt Switch out as the Gulge comes in, and Who flip turns. I hope you're keeping track of the removal at home at the momentum moves at home, kids. There's another one in Volt Switch as he goes back into Almamola. And that Hydro Pump doing 8 shows that it is, in fact, the Who special of AV. Flip turn once again on the Dragulge as we go Masquerada this time. And notice how all this is taking Rock's Chip, and this is something Who doesn't really like. We see a U-turn once again as it's taking Helmet. Masquerada's at 55. Almamola comes in, looking for more regen. Volt Switch does 12. And here's another flip turn. Yeah, I've lost track already, guys. If someone wants to put in the comments, feel free. The Uxie comes in this time as Who clicks Volt Switch. And we see the Mandibuzz come back in. The Choice Scarf Mandibuzz, keep that in mind. And here's the defog. And all of a sudden, all that Rock's pressure is just gone again. He goes Chi-Yu, trying to get the Nasty Spell back up, but obviously Who now has the Hydrapple at a point where it does live +2 Fire Blast. As we see the Terra Grass come out here. Fire Blast does not quite get it done, and Dragon Tail does 27, forcing in the Almamola. Masquerada comes in on the flip turn, as we see the Iron Treads come in, which does not scout for Banded Low Kick. And all of a sudden, the Rocker's dead. However, I don't necessarily think that the Treads being alive would have been a massive deal here. Because Mandibuzz was always in a position where if you went into Uxie or into Almamola, that it could just defog for free. Yes, Chi-Yu might come in, but the way Who's been positioning, it's just to make sure that the Hydrapple is always out of range of +2 Fire Blast. And that is a big deal here. So the Banded Low Kick picks off the Treads. As we see the Chi-Yu come back out. But you can just go Mandibuzz here on the Terrablast grass, which is trying to catch the Almamola. As 64 Squares goes into his own Almamola to take a Toxic, which is kind of annoying. Hydropple comes in, looking to get back healthy-ish. As Chiyu comes back in, as we see the Almamola pivoting this time on the Fire Blast. And we see the pivot out in the Hydropple again on the Terrablast grass. It's not quite getting regen, it's getting about 2% back. But here's another pivot on the Fire Blast. And here we see Mandibuzz come in again on the Terrablast grass, not killing, doing 28. Almamola comes in as Mandibuzz goes for Scarf Roost. And I just kind of want to pause this here and mention what I said earlier in regards to Mandibuzz, that it has the same utility options as Tentacruel does, but the reason that it's more successful in this metagame, one, I think is partially due to typing, and two, it's a lot easier to throw in on Mons because of reliable recovery. Roost makes it such a big deal while having the exact same options as Tentacruel, and being able to get that reliable recovery off against a lot of the kind of, I wouldn't necessarily, the slower stuff, and I would say the slower stuff that isn't doing crazy damage to it, and there's a, or the stuff, or the faster stuff that's not doing a crazy amount of damage to it. There's a lot of it in this tier. Like, have a sit down and look through an SV tier list. A lot of it just does not like dealing with Mandibuzz. And that's just how the metagame is. And that's why I'm not surprised that Mandibuzz usage is kind of on the rise, and I imagine that's going to keep going upwards. And yeah, you can just kind of see here, yes, it only kind of got the defog off once, but it was probably going to be able to get the defog off on multiple occasions, which just means that his pivoting between his AV regen, whose AV regen mons, was just a hell of a lot easier. And yeah, we might as well just let the rest of this game play out. You can kind of see how it's going, though. The Hydropple is now out of range of +2 Chiyu again. We see AV Aloe again. We see a Gunk Shot revealed by the Dragolge, something different. But this thing's at 50 solely from taking momentum-based moves. It is ridiculous. And it takes another one, which does a grand total of 4. As Hu goes back to Almamola on a Hydro Pump. Gunk Shot misses this time as the Almamola flip turns again. This thing is still dying to mono momentum. See, goes Yuxi here on another Volt Switch. Phantom Masquerada comes in, knowing that knockoff claims 1. The 1 is, well, or does it? I think this is just a challenge Hu has in his mind of can he kill the Dragolge solely with momentum-based moves. We see the Chiyu come in this time as the Treads goes for Volt Switch, not quite giving him his goal. Masquerada comes in. See the Almamola pivot on a Flower Trick, which means it's going to do 99 and die to the poison from the Mandibuzz. Chiyu comes back in. This is just a... Yeah, Flower Trick just kills Bandit Masquerada, proving the finest of work, and he just forfeits because there's nothing he can do. And this is case in point for what Hu teams do, and any variations of it, which we've seen quite a few attempts of it anyways, whether that be with Masquerada or with Torn T. You're kind of seeing a lot of like Torn Tinglu type structures. But Mandibuzz and Corviknight, like, they're honestly interchangeable in these sorts of things, but when you have this fatter structure, it's better to have the defogger, because the fact, A, you can deal with screens, and B, you can always ensure that you're going to get the removal off unless you're taunted. Which, to be fair, it's kind of harder to taunt the removal mon at the minute than it is to go into your Ghost type on a Rapid Spinner. But that might be a hot take. But the moral of the story is that the Hu structure has definitely had an impact on how people approach SV. And that just means that the rise in Mandibuzz particularly with Hu, and Corviknight was kind of seeing some usage. I remember Phantom Thieves, my bad, picked one up in mid-season last year, and kind of this really interesting like team that kind of made from leftovers that I ended up playing. And it just kind of had all the utility options it needed. So it's honestly no surprise that people pivoted to defog. And yes, these two are the standout two. But there's one more that I kind of wanted to cover here. And I have this game here, which is from the DCL that's currently ongoing and was played a grand total of 2 days ago. So you're probably looking at the screen and wondering what the defogger is. The defogger in discussion is this guy. It's knackered. And we'll kind of get into the game as to why, but I want to briefly talk about why knackered has just been good for a while. It was seen as a really nice secondary, like cheap Terra captain at first. It's still a great breaker, has a lot of really good options, strong priority, good coverage, but its access to defog is something we've been kind of seeing more as time goes on. Because of its ability to force switches, it's easier for it to actually be able to defog hazards. And let's just hop into this game here between Toxic and Lucas and kind of showcase that a bit. I'll actually say the Terras this time because why not? The Raging Bolt is Terra Ghost, and the Urshifu Rapid Strike is Terra Fairy. I think the Ropon's also Terra in this game, but I don't remember. See a Jirachi lead here from Toxic, clicking Body Slam on Lucas's Ogerpon, which goes for knockoff, getting rid of the Choice Scarf. Spikes goes up from Lucas, as we see a U-turn out, and the Gliscor comes in to get the Toxic Orb off. We see more spikes go up, as Toxic also sets spikes, as the Darkrai pivots in, taking a U-turn in the process. Ouch. Conk comes in, and does reveal to be Flame Orb, as Lucas makes the obvious switch into Quillfish, and Conk clicks Mop Punch, taking Rocky Helmet damage and burn, giving it 61. Lucas tries to set more spikes, but Toxic says no, I'm going to defog. And this defog is just going to make things a hell of a lot easier, because Lucas clearly had a hazards-based strategy here. He clicks spikes again, though, as the Gliscor trades spikes. U-turn here into an Almamola on an Ogerpon, as you do, with counter doing 48. Wow, that was stupid of me. I was literally just about to comment on the Gliscor being faster, but yeah, obviously counter. See a Spiky Shield trying to chip down the Almamola some more, as U-turn kills the Ogerpon here, with 2 layers of spikes being up. Raging Bull comes in here from Toxic, leading to the Iron Treads coming in from Lucas, getting a Spit Def boost on Cork Drive. Not one you see very often. Rocks goes up from the Treads, as another layer of spikes goes up. Almamola pivots in on Lucas's Latias, which sets a screen. And you can kind of see where this is going with Defog Conk, because if it wasn't for Defog Conk, Lucas probably cooks him with Terra Fairy Urshifu Rapid. So we see the flip turn here into the Jirachi, which takes a lot of hazard damage. The Treads comes in as the Trick Room goes up, and all of a sudden there is a very forcing line. Lucas clicks Rapid Spin, Body Slam powers, with EQ getting the kill because Jirachi managed to paralyze the Treads with Body Slam. So Conk comes in with the Intimidate going off as we see a defog, getting rid of 5 lines of text, which is crazy. But getting rid of those spikes as well as the screens just makes the endgame a bit easier for Toxic. Yes, there's still the threat of Latias getting screens up again, but I think there is positioning options here. But you can kind of see exactly what I meant in regards to Conk using the turns where it would force switch-ins, or in the face of something like a Quillfish, which thinks, oh, this isn't staying in here, that it can kind of get that defog off when it needs to. And it was critical in this matchup. Conk is preserved as we see a flip turn into the Rapid Strike. See a bulk up from Lucas as the Gliscor U-turns out. Back into Raging Bolt, which I assume is going to Terra Ghost here. It does not. It just reveals to be fast, clicking Volt Switch and doing 33. Our protagonist of the story gets sacked off here to Surging Strikes, so we could technically quit the video here, but I'll show the rest of the game. Terra Blast does 43, as +1 Surging Strikes does not quite get it done, leaving it at 16. The switch out means that there is no Aqua Jet there, as Terra Blast Ghost does 33, and doesn't quite kill the Treads either, with the Treads opting to get a Rocks expecting the switch. Terra Blast Ghost kills the Treads here, as we see the Darkrai come in. Almamola pivots into said Darkrai, which knocks off the Assault Vest. More instances of the Who logic, which a mon like Avialo definitely does want hazards off, so it kind of plays into the narrative of what we said about Defog. They're both kind of in tandem. But we see the Healing Wish come off here from an Avialo. Good prep from Toxic, expecting it to get knocked off at some point. As the U-turn picks off the Darkrai. Healing Wishing up the Raging Bolt that just looks like it's going to be a giant problem. We see a Choice Scarf Raging Bolt here, collect Draco Meteor, as Lucas clicks Light Screen. That is unfortunate. Draco does not hit the Urshifu. Gliscor comes in, as the Latias comes back in to get a Healing Wish off, presumably. Yes, there's the Healing Wish. As spikes go up, which would have killed the Urshifu. Well, it wouldn't have. It would have needed another couple layers, but we have a full health Urshifu anyways. We see the EQ doing 20% to Urshifu as Surging Strikes comes off, which doesn't kill, which is incredibly impressive from Gliscor, living up to its nickname of thick as fur. It dies this time, though, unsurprisingly. It's at 17%, for God's sake. And the Roaring Moon comes in, clicks Iron Head, gets an unfortunate flinch, but I think it ultimately, at this point, didn't really... Well, no, I don't honestly know the calcs of what Terrablast Ghost would do, but it was also 50-50 in this instance, because he could also definitely pivot into Raging Bolt on the Drain Punch. So it was definitely like a major game of mind games. But, you know, why deal with mind games when you can just flinch him? We'll never know what Lucas actually clicked. Well, we're assuming Drain Punch by the fact he said Brutal. And yeah, he just keeps clicking Scarf Iron Head here. Flinches again, but it doesn't really matter. It's taking more Helmet as Quillfish tries to get up some Desperation Spikes to chip down the Raging Bolt, but it's just not going to be enough. As, yeah, Toxic is going to go on to win this game with his Choice Scarf Raging Bolt. Yeah, tries to get up a 4th layer of spikes. Pfft, heck's sake, Lucas. Nothing you could do here, though, as Terrablast Ghost is able to pick up the game. But the big thing here was Konk's ability to actually defog. And this has definitely become a much more popular thing. Because yes, Konk was getting usage last year, but yeah, that was more so for everything else. And it was like, defog was an afterthought, but now defog has become much more of a major thing. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this something a little bit different. I'm sorry if it got a little bit rambly at times. It definitely could have. Sure, I've been going for how long at this point? Jenny Mac, it's been 32 minutes of me talking about hazard removal. You guys need to stop me. Good God. But I just kind of wanted to give an insight into why we've kind of shifted from the days of Tentacruel to these much more offensive options of removal in the case of Cyclizar and Conkeldurr, or the more kind of, yes, they're passive, but they have the options to where it can deal with the offensive side of the metagame, but can also enable the offensive side of the metagame. And that's why Corvin Mandibles are as popular as they are. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope you're looking forward to some other stuff that I have in the works. I have a couple exciting vids that I'm currently in the process of either making, writing, or asking people about. So I hope you're looking forward to those. Anyways, guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.